Have you ever observed how certain individuals possess a presence so profound they don't need to speak to be felt? They enter a room and the atmosphere subtly shifts, not through grand gestures or dramatic words, but through something far more rare: stillness, silence, an unshakable refusal to be pulled into the noise. You feel their energy before they say a single word. And that quiet strength? It unsettles people. It creates questions, stirs curiosity, provokes discomfort. There's something magnetic about those who do not make themselves immediately accessible. And perhaps the discomfort they provoke is the greatest sign of their power. But what would happen if you embodied that same stillness? If you stopped reacting to every comment, every invitation, every emotional disturbance that seeks to pull you off center? If you chose calm over chaos, silence over explanations, boundaries over appeasement, what would shift? Everything. Because the world is conditioned to your predictability. You've been taught to comply, to respond, to maintain peace even when it costs your inner harmony. But the moment you stop offering yourself so freely, when you reclaim your presence without explanation, people no longer know how to categorize you. And in their confusion, a deeper truth emerges. They never truly saw you. They only knew how to navigate your reactions. Why does your withdrawal stir such discomfort in others? Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." So when someone becomes agitated by your absence, ask yourself, are they truly upset with you, or are they confronting their own lack of control? When your silence provokes, it's rarely the quiet that unsettles them. It's what the quiet reflects back, their own unrest. And more importantly, it reveals how much of your life may have been shaped by invisible emotional obligations. How often you've betrayed your own needs to meet the expectations of others. How many times have you said yes when your entire being was screaming no? How often have you replied out of guilt, engaged out of habit, smiled when your soul was exhausted? All to preserve connections that may have never been genuine to begin with. Why? Because we've been conditioned to believe that love equals availability. That to matter, we must always be accessible. But the truth is, constant availability often comes at the cost of your spirit. Have you ever reached the end of a day feeling completely drained, yet unsure why? That deep, unshakable fatigue, the kind no sleep or conversation can fix, is the result of energy given too freely, too often, to those who never truly earned it. The Stoics warned us of this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary?" Yet we move through life as though time and energy are infinite. They're not. And often, the ones who demand the most from you are the ones who consider the cost to you the least. So why do we keep giving? Because of what Jung called the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted. We perform. We say we're fine when we're breaking. We smile while we're bleeding inside. We become actors in a play we never auditioned for, just to earn the applause. And the more we perform, the more we lose touch with who we really are. But how do we stop? How do we take off the mask and reclaim our energy? It begins with understanding what Jung referred to as psychic energy. Every thought, every emotion, every decision consumes it. And every time you argue with someone unworthy of your time, explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, or say yes just to avoid tension, you spend that energy. And unlike money, once it's gone, it doesn't return. There is no refund for emotional depletion. So the real question becomes, are you choosing where your energy flows, or are you letting the world choose for you? Every impulsive reaction is a power leak. The Stoics knew that the only true form of freedom was self-mastery. As Epictetus wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Yet most of us are ruled by unexamined impulses. We rush to fix, to please, to explain, without pausing to ask, is this worthy of me? But what if we didn't? What if we paused, held our center, and allowed silence to speak for us? That's where your power lives, not in how loudly you assert yourself, but in how deeply you know you don't need to. What if, instead of always responding, we began observing? What if we learned to pause, to breathe, to retreat before we speak? Wouldn't that change everything? The challenge is, silence is not easy. Stillness is unfamiliar, and people often resist what they do not understand. Why do they grow irritated when you don't reply immediately? Why do they accuse you of being distant when you choose not to answer a call? It's not because they miss you. It's because they no longer control you. Your constant availability was their comfort. Your immediate compliance, their validation. And when you remove that, they're forced to face something they've long tried to avoid: emptiness. But what about you? Are you ready to face that silence? To sit in the discomfort of not being needed? To endure the fear of being alone, misunderstood, even disliked? Because that is the price of freedom. The Stoics taught that peace does not come from controlling others, but from mastering ourselves. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." And in this case, bravery means stepping away from familiar roles, even when it unsettles those around you. So how do we begin? By paying close attention to our triggers. What makes your chest tighten in anger? What situations make you feel the need to prove yourself? These aren't random emotions. They are signals. They reveal where your boundaries are weakest. And once you see that, the real work can begin, not to become cold or detached, but to become sovereign. To be sovereign means to belong to yourself. Your time, your mind, your energy. No one else owns them. And from that place, something profound occurs. You stop reacting. And when you stop reacting, people lose the ability to manipulate you. Carl Jung spoke of projection as the unconscious transfer of our inner world onto others. But the inverse is also true. When we are too emotionally available, we become a blank screen. Others project onto us their fears, their needs, their insecurities, and we mistake that projection for connection. Have you ever known someone who only calls when they're in crisis? Who disappears when their needs are met? Who praises your strength only when it serves their agenda? They're not relating to you. They're relating to the role you've accepted. And why did you accept it? Perhaps out of fear of being seen as selfish, of being abandoned, of letting someone down. But the most powerful manipulation doesn't come from force, it comes from guilt. From the quiet, invisible pressure that you owe something you never consented to give. So what happens when you stop playing the role? When you say no? When you respond with silence instead of justification? People get uncomfortable. They question your character. They may call you distant, arrogant, selfish. Not because you've wronged them, but because you've stopped serving the story they built around you. And once you step out of their narrative, they're left to face their own reflection. So how do you stay grounded in that moment, when the pressure to explain feels overwhelming? By remembering this, silence is not absence. It is amplified presence. In a world that rewards noise, the one who can sit in stillness commands the room. But silence isn't just about withholding words. It's the strength to choose your battles wisely. It's the clarity to know that not every accusation deserves your energy. Not every invitation is worth your time. Not every conflict requires your voice. Why do we fear silence? Why do we equate stillness with weakness? Because we've been conditioned to believe that presence must be performance. But the deepest power often lies in the refusal to perform, in the quiet ability to walk away, unfazed, in the strength to disengage when engagement would cost your peace. That, the Stoics believed, is true freedom, not needing praise, not fearing judgment, standing rooted in your own values, unmoved by the chaos of others. But let's be honest, silence has a cost. You will lose people. You will unsettle others. You will be misunderstood. But pause and ask yourself, were those relationships built on truth or on your constant availability? Because the more you evolve, the more selective you become with your time, your energy, your presence. Eventually, you realize words are expensive, and not everyone deserves the full story. So what do you gain in return for your silence? What grows in the space once filled with over-explaining, apologizing, and constantly reacting? Clarity, peace, strength. You begin to hear your own voice again. You remember what you like, what you need, what you value, not what others expect from you. And in that space, something beautiful happens. You stop chasing connection. You become connection. Isn't that what we're really searching for? Not just peace with others, but peace within ourselves. Jung believed that the journey of individuation, the path to becoming your true self, requires a break from the collective. Not isolation that drains you, but the sacred kind, the kind that heals, the kind that makes you whole. So how do you know you're on the right path? Watch who leaves. Notice who gets uncomfortable when you protect your energy. Pay attention to who says you've changed when you finally say no. These aren't signs that you're wrong. They're proof that you've stopped betraying yourself. But doesn't it hurt? Of course it does. Growth always comes with grief. You'll grieve the version of yourself that said yes out of fear. You'll grieve the comfort of being wanted, even if it wasn't real. You'll grieve the illusion. But what comes after the grief? What happens once you reclaim your time, your boundaries, your energy? That's when rebirth begins. You start building a life grounded in truth, not obligation. You attract people who don't need to use you to feel whole. You create space for what nourishes you instead of what drains you. You begin to feel strong, not loud, not dominant, but quietly, unshakably strong. And isn't that the goal? To live a life where you are no longer available for anything that doesn't align with your truth. To stop accepting emotional crumbs. To begin demanding peace, integrity, and authenticity. That kind of life doesn't come from reacting. It comes from reclaiming. From remembering that your presence is a privilege, not a promise. So now, the final question. Are you willing to be misunderstood? To be alone for a while? To walk away from what's familiar in order to return to yourself? Because that is the cost of peace. But that is also the path to freedom. If this resonates with you, then the journey has already begun. You've already taken the first step. Now take the next one, and the one after that. Say it with your silence. Say it with your absence. Say it by simply not responding. You don't owe them a thing, but you owe yourself everything. And maybe now more than ever, it's time to say, I choose my peace. But even as you begin to rebuild, how do you protect what you've found? How do you keep your newly reclaimed energy from being pulled back into the same patterns that once exhausted you? It begins with remembering this. Change isn't a single decision. It's a daily discipline. A quiet promise you make to yourself every time the world asks you to shrink. Every time someone presses your buttons, calls you cold, or tempts you back into the old roles of pleasing and performing. You pause, you breathe, and you choose peace again. The Stoics taught that nothing is more precious than the fortress of your own mind. Epictetus wrote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." You can't control how others respond to your silence, but you can choose what to do with it. You can make it a home, a sanctuary, a sacred space where your truth echoes louder than anyone's expectations. And yes, sometimes choosing yourself feels lonely, but solitude is not loneliness. Solitude is chosen. It is deliberate. It is sacred. The greatest minds, philosophers, mystics, artists, all speak of the same truth. There is a silence within you that holds more wisdom than 1,000 voices outside. And what do you discover in that silence? That you don't have to earn love by performing. That your worth isn't measured by how fast you reply or how much of yourself you give. That those who truly value you will respect your boundaries, not resent them. Those who truly care won't vanish when you become less available. They'll rise to meet you where you are. So the final question becomes, can you be strong enough to give them that chance? Can you be brave enough to stop bending to every emotion, every request, every wave pulling you back into someone else's story? Because this is where true peace begins. And this is where your power returns. Emotional strength isn't born from resistance, but from non-reaction, from clarity, from the stillness that comes when you know exactly who you are, and no longer need to prove it. You begin to see just how much of your life was shaped by fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of being unloved. Fear of being unwanted. But once you choose stillness, once you stop being constantly available, something remarkable happens. The fear begins to fade. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Every time you choose to protect your energy, instead of handing it away, a special kind of confidence forms in that space. A quiet certainty. It's not arrogance. It's not superiority. It's sovereignty. It's knowing that you no longer need others to define you. That is the foundation of Stoic self-respect. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And when your thoughts are rooted in strength, not survival, your soul begins to shine through. So what if your silence wasn't a void? What if it was a statement, a declaration that says, "I am no longer performing. I am no longer giving my energy to what drains me. I am no longer available for anything that costs me my peace." That kind of clarity doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you free. And that freedom speaks louder than words ever could. When you stop being available to everyone, you finally become available to yourself. You open the door to better relationships, stronger boundaries, more meaningful conversations, and a life aligned with who you truly are, not who you've been trained to be. And what about the ones who still don't understand? Who try to guilt you, label you, twist your silence into something negative? Let them. Their confusion is not your burden. Their projections are not your truth. You no longer owe them explanations. You owe yourself alignment. This isn't about building walls around your heart. It's about knowing when to open the door and when to keep it closed. It's about preserving your energy like it's sacred, because it is. And the more you practice this, the more you'll see something incredible unfold. The right people will gravitate toward your peace, and the wrong ones will disappear into the noise. They can no longer infect you with. You've spent years watering dead plants, apologizing for your needs, shrinking yourself to be digestible. But not anymore. The journey begins now, with every small moment of silence, with every conscious pause, with every breath taken instead of a reaction given. You are returning home to yourself, and what you'll find there is extraordinary. You don't need to be liked to be whole. You don't need to be available to be worthy. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. You only need to be honest, with yourself first and foremost. So here's the final question. Are you ready to protect your energy, like your life depends on it? Because in many ways it does. Your time, your peace, your presence. These are not favors. They are gifts. And from this moment forward, only those who can honor them should ever receive them.